The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Family dinner Friday. Mom's cooking your favorite. 6 p.m. Don't be late. It was sent by my older brother Ethan Cross to the family group chat. Within minutes, reactions poured in. Heart emojis. Thumbs up. Can't wait. See you then. Everyone responded quickly, everyone except me. 3 hours later, I finally replied with a simple okay. No one reacted. That was normal. In my family, I existed in a strange in-between space. Not ignored entirely, but never truly seen. I was present, tolerated, quietly accepted, but never celebrated. I leaned back in my chair on the 42nd floor of a downtown Seattle tower, watching the late October sun turn the skyline gold. My screen showed real-time analytics scrolling smoothly, 94 million active users, 127 countries, Q4 revenue projections at $287 million, server capacity sitting comfortably at 73%. My company, NeuroAxis Analytics, had reshaped how global businesses understood customer behavior through AI-powered prediction models. In less than 7 years, it had grown from a one-woman startup in my apartment to a company valued at $4.2 billion. But to my family, I was still working on that computer thing. Growing up in Bellevue, I'd always been the odd one out. Ethan was the golden child, varsity football, student body president, a full ride to Stanford, an MBA from Wharton, now a managing director at a top investment bank. My sister Claire Cross followed close behind, debate champion, Yale graduate, Harvard Law, partner at a major Seattle firm before turning 35. And then there was me. The quiet one. The kid who skipped pet rallies to teach herself Python. The teenager who cared more about algorithms than popularity. The daughter who never quite fit into the definition of successful my parents understood. Computers are fine as a hobby, Mom used to say gently. Technology is a tool, not a career, Dad would add. But I didn't want a job. I wanted to build something. By the time I turned 19, it was already clear that my life wasn't going to follow the neat, predictable path my family valued so much. While Ethan was touring college campuses and Claire was collecting academic awards, I was spending nights teaching myself code, watching tutorials, and breaking software just to understand how it worked. I dropped out of community college halfway through my second semester. To my parents, it felt like failure wrapped in stubbornness. To me, it felt like freedom. My first startup was painfully simple, an analytics dashboard for small online stores. I built it alone, convinced that if I worked hard enough, success would eventually follow. It didn't. Within a year, I ran out of money, users, and optimism. I moved back into my tiny apartment, sold furniture to pay rent, and avoided family dinners whenever I could. No one said, "I told you so," but they didn't need to. At 21, I tried again. This time, the idea was better. The execution was stronger. The confidence was real. For 18 months, I lived off instant noodles and caffeine, pitching investors during the day and coding through the night. When the funding dried up, the silence from my inbox felt louder than rejection. That Christmas, the conversation finally happened. "You've given it a fair shot," Ethan said, swirling his wine casually. "Entrepreneurship isn't for everyone, Lena. There's no shame in getting a normal job." "I'm not most people," I replied, barely above a whisper. Claire smiled, the kind that felt harmless but wasn't. "Most people know when to quit." But something in me refused to accept that answer. At 23, with my last $8,000, I started again. No pitch deck. No safety net. Just an idea that wouldn't let me sleep, AI that could predict customer behavior before it happened. Not just analyze data, but anticipate it. I called it NeuroAxis Analytics. The early months were brutal. Rejection emails stacked up. Investors laughed politely. Friends stopped asking how it was going. But one client said yes. Then another. Then 10 more. By the time I turned 30, we had 412 employees, enterprise contracts across 127 countries, and negotiations underway for a funding round that would value the company at $4.2 billion. And my family still thought I was trying to make something work. Tomorrow, the world would know the truth. They wouldn't. Friday evening arrived wrapped in cold rain, the kind that seemed permanent in the Pacific Northwest. I left my apartment just after 5, sliding into my 6-year-old Subaru, the same car I'd driven since my second startup failed. It was practical, forgettable, and perfectly aligned with the version of me my family believed in. My parents' house in Bellevue looked exactly the same as it always had. Warm lights, neatly trimmed hedges, and a sense of stability that had never quite fit me. Ethan's BMW was already parked in the driveway, right beside Claire's Audi. My Subaru looked small and out of place between them. Mom opened the door with a smile that was genuine and soft. "Lena, you're freezing. You work too much. Are you eating properly?" "I'm fine, Mom," I said, giving her a quick hug. Inside, Dad sat in his usual chair watching the news. In the kitchen, Ethan and Claire were laughing loudly with Michael, Claire's husband. Their voices filled the house with confidence and certainty. "The tech founder has arrived," Ethan called out when he saw me. "How's the internet business, Lena? Still changing the world from your laptop?" Claire poured wine and laughed. "Be nice. She's very serious about her little project." "It's not a hobby," I said quietly, setting my bag down. "It's my company." "Right," Ethan replied, making air quotes. "Your company." Dinner was announced, and we gathered around the familiar table. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables, comfort food, perfectly prepared. Conversation flowed easily until it turned toward me, as it always did. "So," Dad said carefully, cutting his chicken. "Your mother mentioned you're still working on that analytics thing. How long has it been now?" 7 years, I answered. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And it's still paying the bills." "I'm doing fine." "Fine doesn't mean successful," he said, smiling like he was being helpful. "How many employees do you have now?" 3. 4. "More than that." 10. Claire guessed. "That's impressive, for a side hustle." I didn't correct her. There was no point. Michael spoke up gently. "I looked at your website once. It seemed professional. Did you build it yourself?" "Yes." Dad frowned. "That's what worries me. You're doing everything alone." "That's not a real company, Lena. That's freelancing." Ethan nodded. "A real business has scale. Infrastructure. Growth. What you have is fine. But it's not serious." I listened in silence, hands steady, heart tired. Then the television volume suddenly increased. And everything changed. Dad reached for the remote, intending to lower the volume as the evening news began. None of us had been paying attention. We were too busy circling the same tired conversation about responsibility and realism. Then the anchor's voice cut through the room. "Breaking news tonight from the technology sector." Dad's hand froze me there. Seattle-based NeuroAxis Analytics has officially announced a Series D funding round valuing the artificial intelligence company at $4.2 billion, making it one of the fastest-growing tech startups in the Pacific Northwest. The room went silent. On the television screen, a familiar image appeared, me. Not the version sitting at the dinner table, but the one from a professional photo shoot. Navy blazer. Neutral background. Calm, confident expression. The company's founder and CEO, 30-year-old Lena Cross, has transformed how global enterprises understand customer behavior through advanced AI-powered predictive modeling. Ethan's fork slipped from his hand and clattered loudly against his plate. Claire stopped breathing. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad didn't blink. In just 7 years, the anchor continued, Cross has grown NeuroAxis Analytics from a living room startup into a global platform serving more than 900 enterprise clients across 127 countries. The screen shifted to footage of a glass high-rise in downtown Seattle, my office building. Major investors including Sequoia Capital, Andreessen Horowitz, and Greylock Partners participated in the round, led by SoftBank's Vision Fund. The company now employs over 400 people and reported $780 million in revenue last fiscal year. No one spoke. No one moved. Ethan was the first to find his voice, though it barely sounded like his own. That can't be you. It is, I said calmly. Claire turned toward me, her face pale. But you said you were doing fine. I said I had a company. Dad slowly lowered the remote onto the table. $4.2 billion. That's the valuation, I corrected quietly. Not cash. Mom looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. How long have you known? We closed around 6 weeks ago. The announcement was scheduled for tonight. Ethan shook his head, disbelief written across his face. You knew for 6 weeks, and you didn't tell us. I met his eyes. Would you have believed me if I had? No one answered. The anchor continued speaking, but the words blurred together: interviews, exclusive coverage, global expansion. None of it mattered. The truth had landed. And it had landed hard. The news segment ended, cutting abruptly to a glossy commercial for luxury cars. The contrast was almost cruel. A moment ago, my life had been summarized in 2 minutes of broadcast television. Now the screen showed smiling models and polished metal, as if nothing in the room had just shattered. No one spoke. The silence stretched until it felt heavy, pressing down on all of us. Claire was the first to move. Her hands trembled as she unlocked her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Oh my God, she whispered. You're everywhere. Bloomberg, TechCrunch, Reuters, they all published it. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, his face growing darker with every article he read. This says your clients include Amazon, Microsoft, Walmart, he said slowly. This says your revenue last year was $780 million. Dad finally sat down, as if his legs had stopped working. You said you had a team, he murmured. We thought you meant 3 people. You assumed 3, I replied. I never said that. Mom was still staring at me, tears filling her eyes. All these years, she said quietly. We thought you were struggling. I was struggling, I said gently. Just not in the way you imagined. Ethan looked up from his phone, his confidence completely gone. This article says you're personally worth over $1.8 billion. Net worth estimates are speculative, I said automatically. They're based on equity valuation. But it's still true, he said. You're richer than anyone we know. That was never the point. Rachel's phone, no, Claire's, began vibrating non-stop. She looked down, panic creeping into her expression. Everyone's asking if I'm related to you. Partners at my firm. Clients. Friends from law school. They're asking why I never mentioned my sister built a billion-dollar company. What are you telling them? I asked. She couldn't answer. Dad cleared his throat. They want to interview me, he said quietly. About what it was like raising a tech prodigy. I almost smiled at the irony. Mom finally stood and walked toward me. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, her voice breaking. Why didn't you say something sooner? I looked at all of them, my successful, accomplished family, now shaken and unsure. I did, I said softly. For 7 years, I told you. You just didn't believe me. No one argued. Because now, the proof was on every screen in the room. Phones started ringing almost immediately. Dad's first. Then Mom's. Then Ethan's and Claire's, one after another, until the room filled with overlapping vibrations. Reporters. Colleagues. People who suddenly cared very much about being connected to me. Don't answer, I said quietly. It'll only make things worse. My communications team will handle it. Mom looked at me in disbelief. You have a communications team. I have several teams, I replied. Communications, engineering, sales, legal, finance, HR. That's what happens when you employ over 400 people. Ethan let out a short, humorless laugh. 400. I can't even wrap my head around that. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. I spent years telling you to get a stable job, he said. To stop chasing ideas. I was so sure I was right. You gave advice based on what you knew, I said. That doesn't make you a villain. It doesn't make me right either, he said softly. Ethan stood up and began pacing the room. I analyze companies for a living, he muttered. This is literally my job. And I couldn't see that my own sister was building something bigger than anything I've ever worked on. You weren't looking for it, I said. You were looking for failure. He stopped pacing and looked at me. That's fair. Claire wiped at her eyes, her voice tight. We treated you like a child playing pretend. We made jokes. We offered you entry-level jobs while you were running a global company. Yes, I said simply. Mom reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. I am so proud of you, she said through tears. I should have said that years ago. Thank you, I replied. But pride now doesn't erase what came before. The words hung uncomfortably in the air. Ethan stepped forward. I need to apologize, he said, his voice steady but strained. For calling your company a side hustle. For laughing. For assuming I knew better. I was wrong. I know, I said. Claire followed him. Can we fix this? She asked. Can we have a real relationship, one where we actually see you? I hesitated. I don't know, I said honestly. That depends on whether you can separate who I am from what I've built. They exchanged uncertain glances. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, my head of communications. The funding announcement had leaked early. We had a problem. I need to go, I said, standing. I have a company crisis to manage. Mom looked startled. You're leaving? Yes, I said. This doesn't stop just because we finally understand each other. Dad nodded slowly. Of course it doesn't. Some truths arrive late. And some distances can't be closed in a single night. The car ride back to my apartment was silent, except for the low hum of the city outside the windows. I stared out, watching reflections blur against the glass, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. The crisis was resolved within hours. A premature leak, a rush headline, a few frantic calls. By morning, the story had shifted from speculation to celebration. Our valuation climbed. My inbox flooded with congratulations from investors who once ignored my emails. Success, I'd learned, never waits for emotional closure. Days passed before I heard from my family again. Dad was the first to call. He didn't mention the company. He asked how I was sleeping, whether I was eating properly, if I was taking breaks. It felt awkward, almost formal, but it was real. Mom sent a message every morning. Sometimes it was just a heart emoji. Other times, a short line, thinking of you. No advice. No doubt. Just presence. Ethan and Claire kept their distance at first. I suspected they were recalibrating, trying to understand who I was without the comfortable story they'd told themselves for years. Then, one afternoon, Ethan emailed me. Not about money. Not about connections. He asked how I'd learned to lead people. What books I read. What mistakes nearly broke me. I replied honestly. Claire followed a week later. She invited me to coffee. Just the two of us. No business talk unless I wanted it. I said yes. The cafe was small and quiet. She didn't brag. She didn't apologize again. She just listened. And for the first time, it felt like she wasn't comparing herself to me, or me to her. Family, I realized, isn't repaired in dramatic moments. It's rebuilt in small, ordinary choices. I still attend board meetings where my last name carries weight. I still negotiate deals that change lives. But now, I also get messages from my mom asking what I'm cooking for dinner. From my dad sending articles he thinks I'll like. From siblings who are learning, slowly, to meet me where I am. They don't fully understand my world. They don't need to. I didn't build my company to prove them wrong. I built it because I believed in myself when no one else did. And that belief, quiet, stubborn, unshakable, remains the most valuable thing I own.